Well, I want to welcome everybody back from lunch and thank you all for being here. It's great to see such a variety of professionals and people from across the region here today and being here this afternoon. Hopefully you're not too sleepy after lunch. Shouldn't, drink more coffee if you are. But, Dee, I'm going to move this up, so you might have to move it back down. Sorry. But my name is Jerry Straussbaugh. I'm the Executive Director of Appleseed Community Mental Health Center. We work closely with our local mental health board and appreciate being able to be part of the planning for this conference. And so, again, thanks to everyone for being here. We appreciate it. I also want to introduce our next speaker, who you've already heard from, Dee Barbash, who happens to be Brooke's mom, but she has her own specialty, and we want to welcome her. Though she was a successful owner in the financial industry, business owner in the financial industry for many years, as she had already sort of referenced, she always knew she was meant to help people heal. Beginning in 2004, she successfully navigated both breast cancer and open heart surgery with a combination of spiritual and Western medical approaches. This approach accelerated her healing, and she began to explore ways to bring her own personal practice to the public. In 2015, she discovered Compassion Key, a revolutionary healing modality that helps people identify, integrate, repair, and release sources of emotional and physical pain, trauma, and discomfort. Dee decided to finally follow her calling, and by 2018 had earned Compassion Key Master certification. In 2022, Dee chose to add hypnosis to her offerings and was certified a master hypnotist and hypnotherapist by the American Council of Hypnotist Examiners. So Dee, we welcome you and we look forward to what you have to say.
Welcome to our afternoon session. Is the sound okay? Okay. This is going to be a little bit of a shift from what we experienced this morning because I was asked to introduce the modality Compassion Key to you, and I'll bet that there isn't anyone here who's ever heard of it or used it. If there's anyone here who does know a little bit about it, could you raise your hand? Put my glasses on to see. Okay. That's typically true. It's a very cutting edge modality, and it's a healing modality, and it happens to be the one that Brooke used that allowed her to heal from her withdrawal. So rather than tell you about it and lecture you about it, I'm going to take just a little bit of time to introduce it so that you understand what we're doing, but I'm going to allow you to experience it. So in order to get ready, you should each have a little packet where you have a sleep mask, a pad of paper, and a pencil. So if you guys could locate those, please. And also, if you have your cell phone on, please turn it off, because this is going to be a real opportunity for all of you to experience something really deep and possibly even transformational. And the cell phone is going to be a distraction. So if you could please turn it off, I'd appreciate it. Okay. So as a way of introduction, first of all, I want to tell you that Compassion Key is a barrier-free modality. So that means that every single one of you, despite your background, your state of quote-unquote mental health or lack thereof, whichever it is, every single person in this room can benefit from what's going to happen today. And the only thing you need to do in order to get the full benefit is to be open, just to be willing. Now, this is going to be a 100% private experience. This is a big reason we have the sleep masks. You are not going to be asked to describe what you experienced or to share anything. If you choose to, there may be an opportunity, but you will not be asked or required to do that. What you're about to experience will be something that's deeply personal. And everyone can benefit, as I said. Just allow yourself to be at least neutral. If you're a little skeptical, try to put that aside and just adopt a sense of neutrality. If you can be open, that's even better. Now, to start, almost everyone that I've ever known, myself included, at some point in their life or at all points of our life. Oh, I'm sorry, where should I?
That way it's hard to hear.
Oh, I have to keep talking into the mic. Okay. All of us experience limitation in our life. All of us experience something that seems to hold us back, or challenges, obstacles. And I'd like you to start thinking about what in your life, if it were to change, would provide the biggest positive impact. Now, whatever that challenge is, that personal challenge that you have, it could be health related, it could be relationship related, it could be career related, it could be around grief or loss or any other chronic difficulty that you've experienced in your life, and that's at the top of your mind right now when you think, boy, if that thing was different, that would make the most impact. So I'd like you to think about that for a minute, then take your paper and your pen and write down precisely what that issue is. Write it in the most complete detail you can, exactly what it is that's bothering you. Now, undoubtedly, most of us have more than one issue, but I want you to pick the one that would have the most impact if it changed. Yes. Yes. I mean, there's all kinds of ones, but when I've done this with clients before, they've said, if I could just feel peaceful inside instead of so anxious. If this health problem were to go away, if I didn't feel so desperately lonely. But it could be anything. It's whatever's meaningful to you. Write that down. The question is, could it be a past experience? Well, we can't change something that happened in the past, but you might need to change your feeling about what happened in the past. For instance, if you can't get over the loss, say you lost someone in your life, you can't get over that loss, the correct answer is, if my mother hadn't died, I'd be better. The correct answer is, I need to get over the grief of losing my mother. Any other questions? Is there anybody who needs more time? Everybody's done? Everybody's got it? Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a quick overview of what Compassion Key is and what we're going to be doing so that you understand a little bit about the modality. Okay. A number of you are counselors, so you'll understand this. Typically, the traditional approach with counseling assumes that we're going to teach the client some skills that they need, like coping skills or other kinds of skills. And that a person needs to go to a series of counseling sessions in order to learn these new behaviors or skills. Compassion Key takes a different underlying approach. And the underlying approach is that every one of us, all of you, is unbroken at your essence. All of you are completely healed at your essence, but there have been things that have happened to you in your life, experiences that you've had that have created wounds or distortions that make the outpicturing of your life a little off balance. And so Compassion Key addresses those wounds and distortions so that we can reveal what's underneath. So the obvious question is, well, how do you do that? And the mechanism for doing this is self-directed compassion. Now, we're all pretty good at being compassionate with others. We know what that means, to show compassion to others. But to do it to ourselves is usually a brand new skill that very few of us have. So I'm going to be helping you with that today. Now, wounding by its very nature is negative. And so when you have an emotion inside or a negative thought, if only I were this, or I wish I wasn't that, or, I wish I felt more, fill in the blank, just by definition, that would be considered negative. But Compassion Key doesn't view anything as negative. We view everything as neutral, and that these negative thoughts and emotions are messages. Messages from our subconscious mind that gives us a map to what we need to heal underneath. And very often, some of the things that happen in our lives, we don't even know why we're reacting the way we are. But it's because of subconscious programming that we may not be aware of. So with some therapeutic modalities, the idea is to reframe negative emotions or to overlay negative things with positive things. Change your thoughts to something positive. Compassion Key, we don't do that. We acknowledge whatever the emotion is as a neutral emotion and nothing more than a message. Every emotion is valid in this modality. Now, sometimes people don't like to admit that they're feeling angry or whatever the emotion is, because by talking about it, they feel that they're reinforcing it. In Compassion Key, we acknowledge things in order to release them. We're not creating a new reality with them. And this is something that you'll hear me start to work with. And in order that you stay neutral with yourself and you don't judge your own emotions, if what I do brings up in you something you would judge as negative, like jealousy as an example, or anger, or hurt, that isn't negative. We're just going to validate the experience of that so that we can release it. Now, there's probably a lot of you here who are familiar with the law of attraction. What we focus on grows. Focus on the positive, because what we think about is what comes into our lives. And we agree as Compassion Key practitioners that that is valid. However, we say it's only half the story. And I'll explain to you what I mean by this. If you were to want to load a new app onto your cell phone, but the app you wanted to load wouldn't run because it couldn't be supported by the operating system in that cell phone, no amount of trying to load that app is going to make it work, because something underneath will not allow it to work. And this is the same thing that we experience with Compassion Key. You're trying to overlay something you want, something that's good, on top of a wound that's underneath that won't allow that good thing to manifest. So in order to get what you want, we have to release what's holding you back. Compassion Key is what releases what's holding you back so that what you want can emerge by itself. This one says, in order to change or eliminate the underlying wound, we need to acknowledge that wound. And since wounding is inherently negative, Compassion Key does not avoid, minimize, or steer around negativity. In order to heal the experiences that hold us back, we need to face them. What we're going to be doing when I guide you through this is that I'm going to be having you put on your mask. And the major reason for the mask is that this needs to be a private and confidential experience, one that you experience with yourself. When we do that, I'm going to be speaking some statements out loud, and I'm going to have you repeat them after me out loud. So you're all going to be speaking them together. I will say the statement, then you will all speak them together. But I'd like you to focus on the sound of your own voice and hear yourself speak it. The out loud portion of Compassion Key is a very important part of the process. Doing it silently will not be the same. And for those of you who are out there on Zoom, in the Zoom world, you can just speak it out loud, even though you're alone in the room. It's very important. Just speak it out loud. You at home are actually in the perfect situation. You don't have to wear a mask, you're alone, and you can get all the healing that everyone in the room will get as well. This one says also that as you speak these things, notice what this causes within you. Notice what happens in your body when you say the statement, what memories it brings up and what you're thinking. You're going to be speaking to yourself with compassion, and that's probably going to be the hardest thing for you because you're probably not used to it. So an example that I like to use is, imagine that you came across, say, a 5-year-old who had fallen down on the playground. And this little guy is crying because his knee is skinned and he's really having a rough time. And you can imagine leaning down and saying to this little guy, "I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm so sorry you fell and skinned your knee. I'm so sorry it hurt so bad." See, you're not trying to change the experience. You're not trying to judge him. You don't say, "Oh, come on, toughen up. It's just a skinned knee." You're acknowledging how he feels in the experience. That's all. You're validating what's happening to him. That's the way I want you to speak to yourself. When you say the statement, validate your own personal experience, Don't judge it and don't try to change it, just validate it. Now you're also going to notice that we're going to be speaking in the second person. So rather than using I, we're going to use you. Now you're actually used to this, because how many of us have not stood in front of a mirror and said something like, oh, I can't believe you made that mistake again. I can't believe you look like that this morning. We're used to speaking to ourselves in the second person. We just don't do it nicely. So this time you're going to do it, but you're going to do it with compassion, using you. And there has been a lot of neuroscience research recently that shows that speaking to yourself with a you is more powerful psychologically and emotionally than using I. Now, of course, I'm doing this for all of you at once. If I was working with you one-on-one, these statements would be tailored to you. But since I'm working in a group, these statements are going to be more general, and some of them may hit an absolute bullseye with you. You'll feel just like a gut punch. Or it may have no effect on you at all, like the statement just passes through you like you're a pane of glass. Or you may resist that statement, be, ooh, you put up the wall. Just notice how you feel about the statement, because this is a big clue to where we're going when we're doing our subconscious mind excavations. This is an adventure into yourself. So I really hope that you take this opportunity to learn something about yourself. Just notice how you feel. Now, probably at least once in the next hour, I'm going to give you a phrase that you don't like or that you fundamentally disagree with. And I would like you to say it out loud anyway. Now, here's the reason why, and I'll give you a religious example because I'm pretty spiritual. Some of you will get this. If I were to say to you and ask you to repeat after me, I'm so sorry that God abandoned you. I personally disagree with that statement because I don't think God abandons anyone. And there are probably a number of you who would be offended by that statement. But I want you all to say it out loud anyway. And the reason is that there may be a part of you deep down inside, even though your head says God doesn't abandon anyone, but deep down inside, there's a part of you who believes that, who believes God did abandon you. And when you say that and you get that visceral reaction, you'll know that there's a part of you that believes that. So don't judge the statements, just say them. If they aren't meant for you, they'll pass through you like glass, like I said. If they hit a bullseye or you push back against them, that's a message. It's important. Okay, I know that I'm asking you all to stretch because this is a process that requires that, but I'm going to ask you to be present with yourself, really be here. Give yourself that gift, because this is going to bring up reactions within you, and that's the gift of it. And also, let go of the idea that you're supposed to have done everything perfectly up until this moment. There isn't anyone in this room, me included, who's done everything perfectly. And, you know, we live this life to grow and learn, and we learn from our mistakes. And in order to learn from our mistakes, we have to make mistakes. So just give yourself a break from the self-judgment. Okay, that's the last slide, so we'll go back. Okay, so the way this is going to work, so I just gave you a little overview. Does anyone have a question before I move forward about this? Okay, I'm going to have you put on your masks in just a moment, and I'm going to do a little bit of a guided meditation. The reason I'm going to do this is to get you to focus your consciousness within your body. You know, we spend so much time not really being in our body, not experiencing our own soul and our own consciousness within our physical body. And so this meditation is designed to bring you in so that you can focus there, so that when we do the compassion key, you'll be able to really be with yourself. After the guided meditation, we will start the compassion key. And if we have time at the end, I'll do a little question and answer, but we may not have time. So please put on your masks. Now, there's a dual purpose for the masks. One is that it's going to help reduce outside stimulation and help you kind of focus within yourself. But the other really important piece of this is that it's going to provide privacy for everyone, because there are going to be some self-assessments here where I'm going to be asking you to raise your hand to give me some feedback. And it's important that everyone feels safe and private in giving me that feedback. So as a courtesy to the other attendees, I'm asking for the masks, please. And I'm noticing some people are not yet or don't yet have them on. And so I'm going to assume that if you have chosen not to put on your mask, then you don't want to participate, and that's perfectly okay. All right, so everyone who has their mask on is going to participate. Okay, here we go. Just take a few deep breaths and allow your eyes to close. Imagine yourself inhaling some clear white light, just calming your body and mind. If there's any part of your body that is uncomfortable right now, feel free to just move it around, sit back in your chair. You can kick your feet off, or kick your shoes off. Adjust anything that isn't comfortable. Very good. Now, typically we leave pieces of ourselves, pieces of our mind, lots of places. Maybe you've left some piece of yourself at home with your spouse or your children, or at your job. maybe even on the highway, at the grocery store. Just these little pieces of yourself, experiences that you've had, they're scattered all around. I'm going to ask you to call all these pieces of yourself, this place where you've left your attention outside of yourself. I'm going to ask you to bring them back. And what I'd like you to envision, if you are visual, is that all of these little parts of yourself can adopt some level or some mode of transportation. Maybe you want to see them strap on some roller skates or start walking, or get on a plane or in a boat or a car or a train or a bicycle. Just imagine them getting on their mode of transportation and beginning to come back to you from all around you, above you, below you, circling around you, all of them converging, coming back to you. And as they come back, imagine them going through a big filter or a screen where they drop everything that doesn't serve you, everything that doesn't belong here today. They drop it outside the screen. And they continue on through, much lighter. All the concerns that don't belong here. Converging, right to the doorstep of your heart. And then just imagine all of these parts of yourself just disembarking from the boat or the bicycle or taking off the roller skates, whatever it is. And just entering your heart, all the pieces of you back, focusing on your heart space, paying attention to the beating of your heart, and now aligning that beating with everyone else in this room. Beating together. Creating this beautiful container of healing in community. Very good. And just leaving your mask on. I'm going to ask you to repeat now out loud a statement after me, exactly as I say it. You're going to be repeating it as a group. And then I want you to pay attention to how you feel about this statement. Now, this is not a mental exercise. I want you to pay attention to the way your body reacts to this statement and what it brings up in you emotionally or in terms of memories. Your mind will try to take this over, but this isn't mental. Go with your gut on this. And after you say the statement, I want you to rate this statement from a 1 to a 10. Now, a 1 is, this statement is false. In every essence of my being, this statement for me is false. A 10 is, this statement is true. In every cell of my being, this statement is true. Now, of course, it could end up a 4, a 5, a 6, it could end up any number in between. But the lower the number, the more false. The higher the number, the more true. So I want you to feel into this statement, give it a number. And once you've done that, you can write your number down on your piece of paper. But first, I want you to repeat after me, please, out loud, all together. I deserve all the best things life has to offer. Very good. See how that feels to you and give that a number. Okay, you should all have a number. This isn't something you should think about. If you need to take off your mask to write down your number, it's okay. I'm going to have you put it right back on. Okay. Masks on, please. Now, if the number you have given, this statement, I deserve all the best things life has to offer, is between a 1 and a 3, please raise your hand. Thank you. If it is a 4, 5, or 6, please raise your hand. Okay? If it is a 7 or 8, please raise your hand. Good? And if it's a 9 or a 10, please raise your hand. Okay. All right. We're going to begin the facilitation now. And I'd like you to repeat these statements out loud after me. Now, on these, you're not going to be giving them a number. You're just going to repeat them. Allow them to land inside of you. See how you feel about the statement. Just notice the memories, the thoughts, the feelings they bring up. And that's all. That's all you have to do. Just notice, don't judge. And that's all you have to do. So please, out loud, after me, all as a group. I'm so sorry. Oh, and let me remind you, please imagine that you're speaking to yourself with compassion as you say these statements. These are the statements that heal the underlying wounds. So imagine as if you were talking to the little boy with the skin knee. You're going to acknowledge your own experience. Say with compassion, say the statement regardless of whether it seems true, false, or otherwise to you. Just allow it to land. You may be surprised at how they feel. So here we go. Turning lots of compassion inward on yourself. I'm so sorry that if the best things in life are possible, they're only for special people. I'm so sorry you're not special enough. I'm so sorry that when you get something good, something bad happens to even it out. I'm so sorry it's not safe to want good things. You guys are doing very well. Good job. Just notice how you feel when you say these things. Listen to your own voice. I'm so sorry good things are followed by bad things. I'm so sorry good things aren't really good because they're always followed by something bad. I'm so sorry it can't get any better. I'm so sorry you felt foolish for hoping it could get any better. I'm so sorry other people get what you can't have. I'm so sorry what works for others doesn't work for you. Very good. Now just pay attention to how you're feeling. And I'm going to have you say our I deserve statement again and give it a number again. Again, 1 is it's false, 10 is it's true. And you may notice that your number has moved. Now your number may move down, up, or stay the same. So please, out loud after me again, but this time giving it a rating from 1 to 10, where 1 is it's false, 10 is it's true. I deserve all the best things life has to offer. Good. If you rated it this time between a 1 and a 3, would you raise your hand? Okay. If you rated it between a 4 and a 6, raise your hand. Okay. A 7 or an 8, raise your hand. All right. A 9 or a 10, raise your hand. Okay. Very good. Again, we're going to do more compassion now. Direct your compassion inward as you repeat the statements. I'm so sorry, it's not safe to forgive yourself. I'm so sorry you did something unforgivable. I'm so sorry you thought the lack of good things was punishment for what you did. I'm so sorry you accepted the punishment. I'm so sorry you thought you deserved to be punished forever. I'm so sorry you thought that if you forgave yourself, you would do the same thing again. I'm so sorry the best things in life are rare. I'm so sorry you felt foolish for hoping. I'm so sorry hope leads to disappointment. I'm so sorry you always end up back in the same place. All right, we're going to do another self-assessment. So again, you're going to give this one the number. See if it's moved up or down or stayed the same. I deserve all the best things life has to offer. How many of you rated this from 1 to 3, please? Okay. 4 to 6? Okay. 7 to 8? All right. 9 or 10? Okay. Now, if your number is going down, it probably means that your first assessment was too high. And that's perfectly okay. It's okay if they move in any particular direction. So again, lots of love turned inward and really paying attention to how you're feeling, what it's bringing up in you in terms of thoughts, memories, and emotions. Just be really with yourself in your body. Here we go. I'm so sorry you felt greedy for wanting more. I'm so sorry you were supposed to be grateful for what you have, even though it isn't everything you want. I'm so sorry it isn't fair for you to have more when others have less. I'm so sorry there's not enough for everyone. I'm so sorry that for you to have all the good things in life, someone else has to give something up. I'm so sorry you're sad. I'm so sorry you feel guilty. I'm so sorry they got angry at you when you asked for more. I'm so sorry you've exceeded your quota of good things. I'm so sorry you can't have what you want in all areas of your life at the same time. Okay, let's do another self-assessment and see if our numbers moved. I deserve all the best things life has to offer. I'm going to go the opposite way this time. If you have a 9 or a 10, would you raise your hand, please? Keep them up for a minute. I'm counting. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. A 7 or an 8, please. Thank you. A 4 or a 5. And a 0 or a 1 to a 3. 1 to 3, please, again. 1. All right. Here we go. Focus the love inward, particularly if your number isn't moving very much. Really try to focus the compassion inward. So here we go. I'm so sorry a good life isn't possible. I'm so sorry you didn't get what you needed to live a good life. I'm so sorry you were behind from the beginning. I'm so sorry bad things happened when you didn't get what you needed to live a good life. I'm so sorry you desperately needed those things and they didn't show up. I'm so sorry. Everyone desperately needed those things and they didn't show up. I'm so sorry. It was your fault. Those things didn't show up. Now, I'm about to give you a few statements that qualify in the area of, I don't believe that these things are necessarily true, but there could be a part of you that believes them. So please repeat them out loud after me. I'm so sorry there was something wrong with you. I'm so sorry you hated yourself for not being worthy of those good things. I am so sorry you're angry those good things never showed up. I'm so sorry you're helpless to change that. I'm so sorry you're angry. Very good. Just focus on how you feel. Take a deep breath. Any way you feel is okay. And now let's do another rating. I deserve all the best things life has to offer. Okay, if you rated this from a 1 to 3, would you please raise your hand? Okay. If you rated this from a 4 to a 6, please raise your hand. Seven to 8, please. Okay, and 9 to 10. Okay, we're going to do one more set, and then if we have time, I'll take some questions. Focusing lots of love inward. I'm so sorry perfection isn't possible here. I'm so sorry no one gets a perfect life here. I'm so sorry bad things last forever and good things fade away. I'm so sorry bad things come quickly and good things take time. I'm so sorry it's not safe for things to happen quickly. I'm so sorry. New things are scary, even when they're great. I'm so sorry you felt foolish for wanting it all. Okay, the last assessment. I deserve all the best things life has to offer. Give it a number. And by a show of hands, how many 1s to 3s do I still have? How many 4s to 6s? How many 7s and 8s? Okay. And how many 9s or 10s? Okay. You can go ahead and take off your masks. You did very, very well. I actually saw a considerable amount of movement from number to number. And I hope that the experience you had helped you identify maybe some sort of underlying belief or something that is blocking you within from achieving whatever it is that you want to heal. Whatever you wrote down as being the major issue in your life, maybe now you have a little bit more of a clue of why there's that block and what you could do to move it. Particularly if you had a number that didn't move very much, then you might have a better understanding of why that block is there. And if you did move a number, then this is the reason we do this exercise. Is because the truth is, we don't get what we deserve in life, we get what we think we deserve in life. So I hope that this has been something valuable today, that you learned something about yourself that you hadn't considered before. This is just, rather than explain Compassion Key to you, I thought I wanted to give you the experience of what it's like to use it. And so if there are any questions, I think I have maybe 5 minutes. No? Maybe I don't have time. If there are any questions. Yeah.
If you could be quick, if there's any questions for Dee.
It's fine if there's not, because it's meant to be a very private experience.
Yep. Okay. All righty. I think the question was, how much should our numbers move?
How much should they move? Well, if I were working with you individually, I would tailor it to ensure that I could get those numbers to move. But working with you as a group, I had to be so general about it. Ideally, I would want to move someone into the 9 or the 10 range, because that gets them mentally in a state where they can achieve the solution to their problem. And the majority of you did move into the 8, 9, or 10 range. But there were some of you who did not. And so I would want to work with that person to determine exactly where that wound was that's stopping them from growing. Yeah. And this is hard too, because you aren't used to this process. So this was just meant as an introduction so that you could understand a little bit about the modality.
Can we thank Dee?
Understood the numbers. I think I was at the wrong spectrum, like you were saying
9 to 10 would mean this feels very true to me. 9 to 10 is like, I would say, I deserve all the best things in life, and if it's a 9 or a 10, then absolutely. You know, yeah. If it's a 1, it's like, I don't deserve it.
Gotcha. I had it mixed up.
Well then,
So
yeah,
that's why when you were saying
okay. As long as you felt the movement within yourself, the number is kind of irrelevant.
thank you
Yeah.
for going over that.
So we may have to, we ran a little long, so I think our next presenter who's coming in on Zoom, I think, yep. So Ashley, if you can go ahead and get the PowerPoints, if there is any, and then we've got a proctor for Mr. Bassman. KK, are you doing that proctoring for, so if you want to go ahead and introduce Mr. Bassman, and then I'm assuming through the magic of Jimmy, we'll be able to bring Mr. Bassman in. Thank you. If you need to take a break, just take a break, but I'd just like to keep it on track if we can.
Hi, KK. Sure, but I'm at the event and I'm waiting. Oh, okay. Um, am I supposed to begin? I don't understand. Hello? That's okay. I okay, I'll begin. Thanks. Bye. Hello, everyone. Um, I guess there's been a little bit of a hitch, but I'm really pleased to be here. I'm not, um, well, I would have rather been in person, seeing all your faces and speaking that way. I don't know if you can see me, but let me begin. I've been doing this for a long time and given many talks, and I still get nervous before speaking with a group. Um, I'm particularly happy to be here because you're honoring the memory of Pat Risser, who I had worked with on various occasions. And I'll share one story of Pat that I remember fondly, and that was we were at a NORPA conference, National Association of Rights Protection and Advocacy, um, and we were in the hotel in Austin, and I had noticed. I think I was standing around with Pat and a couple other people, and I had noticed that on the other side of the room was Quentin Tarantino. Um, I'm sure most of you know his reputation. And we were standing around talking and thinking, we should get him to come into one of the workshops. He would be involved. He'd be a real help in fundraising and whatever we're doing and spreading the word. But we didn't know what to do. And Pat walked up with took a program down to the table where Quentin Tarantino was and said something to him and got his autograph on the program. And then we auctioned it off later when we were doing one of our main events for fundraising. Anyway, the other memory I have of Pat is just he was consistently a warrior. You know, he spoke the truth to power regardless of anything else. And I'm sure some of you who have known him recognize that. So what I'd like to talk about today is I'll share some of my story and what I believe. And also, I'd like to share our project Safe for Recovery, also called Survivors and Families Empowered. That has been a dream of mine for many years. It really um, took shape the most in 2000 when I was doing a paper for INTAR. And that was international group that was interested in recovery. And I wrote a paper with two social workers. One had a adult son who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and she had done a number of things, but unfortunately, he needed things that we didn't know what to give or at that point in time. But anyway, the paper I wrote was on families, and that kind of laid fallow for what, 25 years. And I'll talk a bit about SAFE, what the project is that we've developed right now. But I'll give you some of my background, who I am, and hopefully I'll have a little time at the end for questions or comments, whatever. My story probably begins when I was 22 years old, and I celebrated my 23rd birthday locked in seclusion and in restraints at a mental hospital. I was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and I was given loads of drugs, stelazine and thorazine. Um, but I was what was called, and probably is still called, a non-compliant patient. I had a high resistance for being for the drugs. I also would run around the ward yelling, "You can't do this to me!" And eventually, I'd be locked in seclusion. I'd say, "You can't do it." I'd be yelling, "I'd sue you. I have rights. You have no right to do this to me." Well, I found out otherwise. Obviously, they could do whatever they wanted with me. Uh, Eventually, they got tired of dealing with me and raising the medication. So they started a program of insulin comas and electroshock. And it makes me think now, back at that time, I had a belief from my reading of comic books. I wasn't very studious. The only thing I read was comic books. And I like to imagine myself as being a comic book hero, that I would never be broken under torture. I would never give up my beliefs. Well, that's when I learned my lesson that everything can be taken away from you. Your beliefs, your memory, your energy, and all things. And that was mostly from 40 insulin comas, which was probably the worst experience that I ever had. It was like being put into a coma and then woken up. The hardest part was waking up because you'd have a sugar solution. And it felt like, to me, like I didn't know whether the answer for what was happening to me was to come out of the coma or stay in it and die. And that happened 40 times. But it did break me. And for the next year or two, I had lost my memory. Um, Mostly it was the memories of the year or two before I was hospitalized. Um, One of my favorite memories, a favorite is a euphemism, was when I had a good friend. His name was Elliot. He's since passed away. And he would come to my home, which at that point I was living in a three-room apartment with my mother and father. And I would sleep on the couch, and all day long I would watch TV shows. And mainly I'd watch the comedies. I remember watching, I Dream of Jeannie, I believe it was, and McHale's Navy, if any of you remember these shows. Um, but I had a good friend whose name was Elliot, and Elliot would come to the apartment and he'd practically drag me out. He said, "Come on, we'll go out, we'll do something." And, I would go along. And we had a couple of old friends that I really didn't remember them, but we were out doing something. And came a point at that I knew that I was supposed to take my Thorazine and my Stelazine and Artane, which was supposed to combat the Parkinson effects. And I took my bottle of Thorazine out of my pocket, a little pill bottle, and I went to take one. And Issa, who was experimenting with drugs, everybody was doing that at that time. This was 1966. And she said, "What's that you're taking?" I said, "Well, it's the drug I'm supposed to take." I don't even know if I told her it was Thorazine because I didn't probably know. And she said, "What does it do for you?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Can I get a couple?" I said, "Yeah, here." I didn't see Issa for a couple of weeks after that. And when she saw me, she said, "That stuff you're taking, take that shit and throw it away." I slept for a week. So this was my year trying to navigate life. And I was fortunate. My family supported me. They loved me. They didn't understand what was going on, why the son that was pretty bright and they had high expectations for was just laying around doing nothing. At the time, I was also in therapy. I was going to therapy twice a week. And I could say, the therapist had no understanding of what I was going through at the time. She was psychoanalytic. Uh, Most of the time, I would come in to see her, and I had nothing to say. And I was just trying to survive. And she would say nothing because at that time, that's the way psychoanalysis was done, that you, the therapist was considered a blank screen and you would talk. Actually, it was called free association. But after about a year, um, I started to get better. My memories started to come back. I started to have more energy. And I was really pissed off about what happened to me. And I was trying to figure it out, and the therapist was of no help. But during that time, I was able to work. I found a job for the welfare board, which was not demanding. And then my cousin, who was a psychologist, told me that I could get an internship with the state of New Jersey um, because I had my master's degree and I just needed to do a few things and I could become a master's level psychologist. At that time, to be a psychologist and to be licensed to practice in every state, you generally had to have a PhD and an internship, but you could practice under supervision if you had a internship. So I applied for it, and imagine, the world you're living in, where there are no peer specialists. Most people in the field, with very few exceptions, believe that if you had a mental illness like schizophrenia, which I was diagnosed with, you never recover. And you're told that you'll be back and forth in mental hospitals and need medication for the rest of your life. Unfortunately, some of that still exists now, but the times are very different. Issues of power are obviously still around. And the idea of people with mental illness having more choice and self-determination is in limited pockets in the country. The saying that I've believed in most was by Janet Frame. For those of you who don't know the name, she's the most famous author, writer from New Zealand. She's written many books. She also was in a mental hospital for a long time, and she was scheduled to have a lobotomy when one of her writings came to the attention of the hospital where she won a prize. And she went on to write many, many books. But what stuck with me always was one saying that she said, the four most dangerous words in the English language is for your own good. For your own good doesn't give you the choice of what you believe. So to skip ahead, I started to come back with a degree of energy and also some sense that I could be a person, a real person, and not be controlled by others. When this was happening, I asked my therapist, who I have no idea where she was at because she was always quiet, except I said to her, how do I know if this is going to happen to me again? How do I know that I'm not diseased or ill? She said to me, you'll know because you'll be starting to feel too good. I listened to that and I said, oh, great. So I have to make sure that I don't feel too good so I stay out of trouble. And that escalated into me being hospitalized for a second time, this time for, I think it was 7 months. And that was back in 1969. And those of you who lived through the 60s know what a tumultuous time that was. Well, I was hospitalized again then, and I believe I was in the hospital for 7 months. When I got out, I just laid on the couch again for a while, but I had another therapist. This one was a person, was a male, a man, and he didn't do any of the formulaic approaches that I had experienced before. We would just sit and talk, and he used to have a thermos of coffee there, and I was still smoking cigarettes at the time, and we'd sit and have coffee and just talk. And one of the things I remember from back that time was I used to see him on Saturday morning, and I lived in New Jersey. Um, and I was working at the time, and I called him and said, a couple of my friends are going down the shore and invited me to go to the seashore with them. Um, and do you think I can miss the appointment? He said, go ahead. You know, you get much more out of it than sitting and talking with me. So there's so many different ways that people come out of these extreme states. But my belief right now, because I researched it and I did everything I could to find out, what does it mean to be crazy, to be psychotic, to be insane? And I believe now, after doing this work for what, 50 years, that all of us are different. And when we go into one of these extreme states, we go into it because we want something different for our lives. We want to grow out of the pattern we're in. And one way we do that as human beings is we can change our reality. Our mind is just super in being able to do that. Unfortunately, for a very long time in the field, people believe that there is no way of changing. You know, you have to be on medications, and likelihood you'll be in and out of hospitals for the rest of your life with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. It's interesting that back at the time when this was happening to me, the diagnosis of bipolar was called manic depressive. And it was rare that people were diagnosed with manic depression. But then it turned, I don't remember the year, where more people were diagnosed with bipolar than schizophrenia. Was it real? I don't believe it was. I think we all have the ability to change our reality. And when you change your reality, you have to work through a lot of things. But it's kind of I was just having this discussion with a member of our SAFE committee about using the word recovery. Most people don't want to recover. They don't want to go back to the time before they were diagnosed with one of these serious mental illnesses. What they want to do is transform their experience. They're looking to do something to make themselves different. And there's another quotation that I like. I've cited it several times in my writing. It's by a anthropologist by the name of Edward Hall. And he wrote a book called Beyond Culture. And when I was reading everything I could to figure out who I was, I came across something he said in his book. And that was, excuse me, the failure to live up to your potential, to have that blocked from your ability to have you live in a way that is not being who you are, is the most devastating thing that can happen to a person. In other words, if you have to do something that is not consistent with your personality, who you are, who you want to be, is devastating. And I believe that's part of what many of us deal with, that the path we might have been stumbling on or pushed upon is not what we really are and what we want to do. I tend to like, if I see something that is a quotation, to cite it. So another one I like, and I think Pat would have liked it. I don't remember if he was aware of this one. It's getting a little popularity now. It was by an Australian Aborigine. Uh, the person who is this quote is attributed to, her name was Lila Watson, who was an Aboriginal activist, but it's never been really solidly documented. And it's, if you haven't heard it, it's, if you are coming to help me, then you're wasting your time. But if your liberation is bound up in mine, then come let us work together. You know, now is a different time than was when I was growing up in the movement for rights. I have been extremely lucky, fortunate that I have met outstanding people, people who have suffered and come back from it and are a tribute to the human resilience. Another quote that I like, it's not actually a quote, but I heard this on a radio interview when I was driving someplace. And if any of you have seen the movie Raging Bull, it's a highly acclaimed movie. Robert De Niro starred in it. I forget the year it was. And Scorsese was the director. And it was about the life of Rocky Graziano, who was a middleweight boxing champion of the world. And he really was depicted in the movie, and his life story was he was pretty violent, not a really nice guy, temper, beat his wife. And the interview I heard was by, I don't remember who did it, but the statement was made by his son that, yes, my father had a particularly bad streak to him, but he never did anything bad to me. And he never said, well, it's hard to express that, never said never and don't give up. And the sentence that he said that stuck with me was anything the mind can conceive and truly believe is possible. I like to think that's something that we can all think about. I'm looking over my notes to see what I might. Oh, let me tell you a couple of stories about my experience as a mental health director of a community mental health center, executive director in South Dakota. At that time, I didn't let anybody know about my hospital experience. The only people that knew about it was people that I known as friends. But I was moved out of New Jersey and had gotten married, was living in Pennsylvania, and I was doing mostly private practice as a licensed psychologist. And I saw an ad for South Dakota for director of the mental health center, and we had a son who was about 4 at the time, and I felt like I wanted to get to a place that had better values than where we were living, which was so materialistic, and thought it would be better for us as a family to live there. So I was working out there as a mental health center director. Um, and I think it was about the first 3 months that I was out there. They were asking, there was a meeting of all the mental health center directors in South Dakota. And they wanted each of the center directors to share what they're doing with people who are seriously mentally ill. And since I was new at the time, I didn't have much to share. But all through the time that I was working as a psychologist, not being out about my own experience, I tried to work in a way that reflected my experience. I did advocacy work and different kinds of things. But at the time, it very few people, professionals, would say that they had experience. Now there's a good, solid piece of professionals who will admit to having been hospitalized and other aspects that shape them, but it wasn't going to be public. Um, and I think the beauty of what we have now is there's starting to be a sense of learning from people with lived experience. I don't think it's ideal at this point, but being able to share stories has really helped to move us further along. So I was a director of this mental health center, and um, it ate at me in some ways, and it ate at me that I couldn't be open about my experience. So I started writing. I was not a good writer, so I tried to learn how to really tell my story and my beliefs. And I did everything I could to to learn to write well. I did readings, and eventually I realized from listening to other writers that the best way to learn to be a competent writer is to read a lot. So I read everything I could get a hold of the classics. I read all of Dostoevsky's works, all the famous authors, and I started to write about my story. At the same time, this meeting occurred in South Dakota, and they had all the center directors there, and the meeting was conducted by NAMI, National Alliance for Mentally Ill, and who were starting to really expand all over the country with their views about how families should react to what was going on, and also the belief that once you're sick with a mental disorder, you need to have special things. You're not going to get better, you know. So we're sitting in this large room with NAMI and other executive directors telling what they're doing and whatever. And in the middle of the discussion, there were also survivors there. Well, at that time, they may have been called consumers, were ex-patients who were always kind of challenging each other about the wording, and that continues to exist today. So one woman who was a survivor said something, and the chairperson of the meeting said, "I don't know what you're so upset about. You don't look like you're schizophrenic." And the room erupted with a lot of dialogue and discourse about saying something like that, that you need to look, even you'll be schizophrenic, but you won't look it. And there was a lot of angry discourse. And one woman who was sitting close to the head of the table was the only one that made sense to me. Her name was Ray Unziker. I didn't know her, but I knew that I needed to talk with her. So about a month later, I called her and asked her if I can come visit. And she said, sure. She gave me her address, and I had a meeting at the time that I was going to be flying to St. Louis. But I stopped at her house and I said something like, I was diagnosed and treated for schizophrenia. And she gave me a big hug and started to tell me about what she was doing. And she was a strong activist. And she brought me to my first meeting of the National Association of Rights Protection and Advocacy, which I knew nothing about. I didn't know that there was a movement beginning of ex-patients and survivors who were trying to change the system. And at that time, I would say that I just opened my eyes that I needed to do something. I always felt in my gut, in my heart, that you need to be open. If you're working with people who have experienced this kind of thing, your greatest asset is understanding. Understanding and compassion is what people look for. So if you can imagine, if you don't never saw a picture of Ray, she was kind of anti-MAME personality. She was bigger than life. And I used to started going down there maybe once a month or so. Sometimes I would take my son, who was 5 years old, and she would call herself Auntie Ray. You know, made me think of Auntie Mame. And every time I left her home in South Dakota, she would give me an armful of books that she called fugitive literature. And these were the stories of, and she did some writing too. And I started to be aware that I needed to do something. I've had experience and I needed to make it work for other people. So she brought me to my first NARPA meeting while I was working out there. And I was amazed to see these were big meetings. There were 400 or 500 people. And I was amazed to see that there were other people who were doing really good work and advocating and fighting for rights. And I wasn't all alone. It's kind of an interesting and tragic thing that to become a psychologist, you follow the completely different route, of beliefs, theories, and then there's another pathway to understanding and working for people, which they're exclusive. They had been exclusive because in an organization of psychologists, which probably had about 30,000 people, and their conferences usually had, thousands of people, that the two didn't interact. I remember that I figured, there's so many people, there's got to be people here who've had the same experience that were psychologists. So I started going to these meetings and I would get permission to put a flyer on the door. And I would put on the flyer for those people who are working or are interested in schizophrenia or serious mental illness. We'll be having an informal meeting where we'll all be talking. And the Psychological Association would give me a room, but they wouldn't allow me to put that down in the program. So I would make a lot of flyers and do it. And I did it for years. And the most people that would show up would be about maybe 15 people. And half of them would be willing to say that they've had this experience. And I stayed in touch with a number of them. But eventually, I was put on a committee for serious mental illness. It was called the Task Force for Experts in Serious Mental Illness. And I forget the name of the term. It was for children too. And I did that for several years and met other people who really were trying to understand things. Um, and then I was at NORPA for quite some time. And the issue for me that comes most needing attention is we need choices. We need to be allowed to make choices, even if they're bad. To take our personal agency away is what keeps us enmeshed in a system that has not worked for us. But I always do think of what we can be doing differently. I'm skipping over a lot of stuff, but I want to get to SAFE. Um, there may have been some talks here about what SAFE is. I don't know. That's one of the things I don't like about giving a talk and not meeting people at the conference and just hearing stuff. SAFE arose out of my thinking back in 2000 and working with people about families. I felt like there was only one way for families to respond to whoever was in the family who was struggling, who was having a crisis. And the family was NAMI. They had their standard views of recovery and what people needed to do. And I felt like they were really missing the people, who didn't go along with that. As a matter of just me remembering that when I was working in New York as a consultant for the Office of Mental Health, I used to have all these fights with NAMI and their belief system that people can change, that they would struggle with a biochemical disorder for the rest of their lives. They had to take medication. They had to downplay their expectations for work or life, which I was told back then when I was hospitalized. My parents were told that he'll always have this, but if he takes his medication, he may be relatively okay, but he shouldn't be in a high stress job. And I felt like NAMI was putting that message out on a national level. Some of the local NAMI groups are better than the national. They have more of a support base, but they're also pretty much into people who are mentally ill don't understand they need to take their pills and do the standards for recovery, so they're forced into it. I'm basically against force. Excuse me, I'm not sure if this is from the conference. Anyway, so a couple of years ago, I met one of your Ohio advocates, KK, and we started to talk about what we could do with families. And out of that evolved meetings that we had with a committee made up of professional people who had experienced serious crises in their lives and wound up stuck in the mental health system but escaped it. There was a psychiatrist who was working with us, who I had worked with in New York, starting self-help groups in outpatient departments of the mental hospital. And we started to think about what we could do differently. One of the things we came up with was the idea of doing a survey. And the survey was to answer 4 questions. And one was, what was helpful to you? What was harmful? What you were looking for to experience, to find that would be helpful? And how would you define crisis? When we did that, we also developed a website, which we put out, and it was called Survivors and Families Empowered, and the initials are SAFE. And we developed a website, 2 of them, the same website, but you can get to it. We what the domains, and it's up now. You can get to it most easily by Survivors #4 Recovery. And we had a wonderful web designer because she was somebody who had lived experience and really wanted to do this. And we had a group of volunteers. And the idea that we came up with was to provide training for facilitators to run multifamily groups with a different belief system than families had. And I can tell you, as I started to get more well known in the field, I did therapy only mostly with people who had been hospitalized or had serious issues in their lives. And one of the things we put up on the website was myths about mental illness. The website is still being developed, and we put down some articles, that I wrote. We also had somebody from Great Britain who had experienced the horrors of the mental health system, who was actually a medical doctor, and she recovered and has written 3 books. So we had an assortment of people, and we were working out how we would do this with just regular people. Some had experience of somebody in their family having problems, and how to get them to be a support and an education group. What I started to say was, I have probably 1 or 2 families call me every week and ask for help with, they don't understand what's going on. They went into a NAMI meeting and they were so discouraged by it. Is there anything else that a family can do? Eventually, we did facilitator training in Santa Fe. We all got together for the first time and saw each other live. We had a tremendous bonding experience and enthusiasm for doing this. And we are at the place where we're starting. We're hoping that we'll get 4 or 5 groups to start now and consider it a pilot project and write it up and expand it. I wrote 2 part 1 and part 2 on the SAFE project for Mad in America, which if you haven't looked at Mad in America, I suggest you do. It's in 13 or 14 countries right now, and it gives a different view of what it means to struggle with being outside the norm and fighting to become a person. So, I'd say look it up. We've gotten our first results from the survey. We've got 164 responses, which I've been told is a lot for a survey if you're not giving people anything except the chance for them to express themselves. And we've put the themes up on the website now. And, much of it was common sense. Let me look at the time that I have left. Anyway, you can see, it looks like I got a couple of minutes. You can see on the website what people have said. A big issue is support. One of my favorite responses to what were you looking for and was not available to you was the response of love and comfort. But we're starting to analyze what constitutes a crisis and do something with that. We're spreading out the results. There are many things that people asked for. Some of them were healing relationships, purpose, meaning, belonging. Support was very strong, looking for that, and community. So what we're trying to do, and we're putting a lot of energy in, is to promote what we're doing at SAFE, to look at critically what's being done on the mainstream and how we can educate and support people and families and develop community. So I could talk for a long time about stuff, but my primary theme in talking is never give up on yourself and always fight for your rights. Join with other people, create community. We're lacking in compassion. I'm not saying you're lacking in compassion, but as a culture, as a society, we need to be more open to other people's needs and not give up on them. Something just came up on my screen. I don't know if I'm supposed to shut up. So, and I don't know if there is actual time for questions, but I'll be here to take them if you want.
Can you
Can't
hear?
be there in person, but
Testing. Ron, can you hear me?
yeah.
Oh, great. Well, Ron, this is David. We spoke earlier in the.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, we had some technical issues early on, but we were able to hear you loud and clear. We do have just a few minutes. I know Stanley's in the wings, ready to go, but do we have some questions that we can ask Ron real quick since we've got the ability to communicate with him? I can run the mic to you.
Hi, Ron. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
I wanted to start by saying thank you. I really enjoyed listening to your presentation, and it sounds like you are doing a lot of really wonderful work. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us, even though you couldn't hear us, clapping and appreciating you. I worked for the National Alliance of Mental Illness. I worked for NAMI Richland County, and I was really disappointed to hear about the negative experience you had. We as an organization, we really try to promote letting people make whatever choices they want and supporting people in whatever treatment they choose. So I am sorry that you and others had a different experience. Our goal is just to be there and be supportive for everyone. And I was just wondering if you happen to know what affiliates or affiliate that you went to so we can explore this and see what went wrong.
I recognize that NAMI, like most organizations, are not free of any fault, but do good things. And I've learned over time um, that local organizations are different than the national in what they support. But I think, I wish I wasn't so pugnacious when I worked in New York, but I was always fighting for people's rights. And I had so many different arguments with the leaders in New York. And the issues with F. Fuller Torrey and forget the name of the man who died, who was in advertising and marketing. And in New York, what happened was Kendra's Law. I'm sure you recognize what that was. And myself and various advocates and different groups fought to have that defeated. But the use of a person, Kendra, who was killed by somebody who was on the streets, was what NAMI did to get Kendra's Law passed. And all the research about Kendra's Law has shown it to be ineffective and no different if you forced somebody into treatment and if you allowed people to make choices. So there wasn't, I know that there isn't a villain in this, that people are trying to do good things. But the stance of NAMI nationally is to get more forced treatment. And that's what Kendra's Law was. And when we're watching in different states, like the CARES plan in California, to lock people up who weren't taking their medication, people on the street, that's not the answer to problems that people have. I used to work with disability groups, and actually I saw, I'm trying to remember what it was. Somebody had sent me something that was just developed by PBS. It's called the American Experience, and it deals with the rights of people with disabilities and looks at it in terms of how the ADA was passed. Um, People want choices. They want to have things accessible. There's never been a full inclusion of the mental health issues that people have I've worked for a number of years trying to get an understanding that people with mental disabilities need to be, um, am I going over time? I gotta cut you off, Ron.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I can't speak too much nationally. I just wanted to point out that locally we can support everyone's choices to different treatments. So
I would suggest you look at the national website.
Anybody else got a quick one? Ron, I don't want to put us here too late. Well, can now that Ron can hear us, can we thank Ron for his Ron, thank you very much from zooming in from Colorado this afternoon.
Thank you for what you're doing to honor people and Pat Risser for all the work that he's done.
Thank you, Ron.
Have
All
a
right.
good rest of the conference.
All right, we'll see ya.
Bye.
So, Stanley, are you ready? As ready as you. Is it okay? Can we take 5? We've been running from thing to thing. So if we, no, I can't give him 10. Let's take 5. Stanley's gonna wrap things up. I think they're gonna be. Thank you very much.
All right, folks, let's kind of start coming back because we're headed home here. So I'm Deb Brookshire. I work at Catholic Charities. I'm in the program administrator for Pathways Peer Support. So I'm really excited to introduce Stan Frankart. We first met Stan not quite a year ago. He came and was one of the main presenters for we did the live 40-hour peer supporter training. And he impressed us all so much. He has so much energy and enthusiasm, and he actually could talk on a variety of topics. But I thought it was real important as we're trying to build peer support at all of our agencies in the community to get everybody on the same page about what peer support's about. So at 16, Stan found himself facing a life sentence in prison. According to Stan, he believes that by God's mercy and grace, that what started out as a life sentence actually ended up being a 10-year sentence where he says God actually gave him a new life. And I'm not going to bore you by reading the rest of what you can read because I really want to have maximum amount of time for Stan to talk to you. There's a whole lot of things he could talk about, but he's going to come and talk to you about peer support. So let's welcome Stan. Okay.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. How y'all holding up? It's been a long day. Good day? Full day? All right. Well, let's give it up for all of our committee who put this together, Ashley University, our presenters before, right? Let's give it up. Absolutely. They've done a phenomenal job. I have a very, very challenging task of trying to round us out to home base. So I'm going to do my best to do that with a spirit of excellence. I'm going to try to do that with some high energy so that way you leave this conference, excited about what's ahead, okay? So with no further ado, my name is Stan Frankart. I am so honored, so privileged to be here celebrating the legacy of Pat Risser. Let's give it up for all of his phenomenal achievements. I would be amiss if I didn't at least do a small tribute to a very, very prominent part of what he said and how that's continued to be a catalyst in my life for the work I get to do and being here before you all today. If you all are at all familiar with any of his work, he wrote a compilation of writings that were to address the issue of mental health courts and coercion and recovery approaches in 2014. And it was titled A Client Perspective of Mental Health Courts and the Use of Force and Coercion. And he says this, he says that our entire system of care for people with emotional distress is built around illness. This is a negative approach. We diagnose illness. We complain of illness. We label illness. How many of us know labels don't feel too good? In peer support, we talk about labeling jars, not people. And I love that Pat Risser embodied this philosophy. He goes on to say that even wellness means an absence of illness. So we treat the symptoms of illness. Recovery means getting over illness. The person who is well is one who causes no community disturbance. No matter how disabled or incapacitated they may be, often as a result of treatment. He closes the opening dialogue of this 153-page article. You can read it for yourself. He closes the introduction of it saying, the outcomes of this approach have resulted in a 25-year reduction in lifespan for people receiving public mental health services, according to a study led by Dr. Joe Parks for the National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors. It has also significantly increased the number of people on Social Security disability, the suicide rate, the incarceration rate, and the homeless rate, according to the National Association for Rights Protection and Advocacy, who Ron was just speaking about and KK is also familiar with, and others who have studied the results of mental health treatments. This is the part that has been a catalyst for my journey, and he closes with this statement. The most detrimental ramification of the current approaches of mental health services and treatment is that they tend to deprive hope. I have the privilege to stand before you all today as an example of what hope can look like. I will tell you a little bit about my history, kind of what led to me being a peer recovery supporter. I was justice involved from a very early age, from substance use disorder. I was diagnosed due to being laced as being bipolar schizophrenic due to some marijuana that had substances in it that I was not familiar with. And so I began to express that in a paranoia kind of expression. They then put me on medication, which led to the revolving door of recidivism in my life, and I found myself facing a life sentence at 16 years old. With that came the spiritual transformation that took place while I was in prison. I do believe in many pathways to recovery. My personal pathway happens to be a spiritual pathway. Where in Richland Correctional Institution, right over there in Mansfield, Ohio, I found myself in the multi-purpose room on the ground being stomped, kicked, punched, and jumped by 10 men over a gang beef. It was at that point that I realized I literally was powerless over my own life. I had no power to get myself off of that ground. I had no power to get myself out of prison. I had no power to get myself out of the lifestyle that had led me to prison. And it was at that point that I said, God, Jesus, whoever you are, if you're real, get me off of this ground. And 5 minutes later, I was walking out of that multi-purpose room and my life was radically changed. I began to get discipled by 3 men, one known as Bobby Johnson, Alfred Cleveland, Savalis Crosby. That led to my spiritual journey, which led to me coming home in 2017, a new creature, as 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17 says. And so because of that, I now try to carry this message of hope to the world around me. Whether that's across the nation, in my own backyard, my neighbor, Miss Betty, who, I love Miss Betty, she's a sweet lady. But my message is hope. And I believe that's what the legacy of Pat Risser was about. The hope that people do recover. And recovery looks very different for each and every person. And so today I want to talk about that in the context of peer support. How many of us know peer support, some good work? Where are my peer supporters at in the room? Let's give it up for our peers in the room. Absolutely. I really want to take an evidence-based look at the importance of peer support. I do know that there is a lot of conversation and a lot of speculation about what is the value, how does peer recovery supporters fit into this continuum of care, how do they work as paraprofessionals alongside of clinicians, because peer recovery support is not clinical, it is a paraprofessional to work alongside of clinicians. And so we're going to discover and talk a lot about that as we navigate this conversation. I will say, as just a caveat for everybody in the room, I pastor at churches that give me like feedback and response, so I may say amen. Do y'all know how to respond if I say amen? All right, praise God. All right, cool. So I know I'm in a room full of people who can understand. I do get a little feedback in my dialogue, so please feel free to chime in where you feel, if you feel your heart beating or your spirit jumping, you can just, you can say amen, whatever you need to do. We are not working. All right, sweet, awesome. So what is a peer supporter? Anybody have an idea? Anybody want to take a stab? Anybody want to try it? You can shout it from your seat. I won't put you on Front Street. I love it. Someone with a lived experience. Anybody else? Yeah, okay, I like it. In a nutshell, yes. SAMHSA does have a working definition, and I always use federal language just because I travel across the country advocating for this stuff. So I'm going to talk very, very high level, federal level conversation about peer support, but peer recovery supporters are people who are trained to use their recovery experiences or lived experience to help guide others who are not as far along in their own journeys towards wellness. And what we mean by not as far as long, how many of us know recovery is a process? Absolutely. Recovery is a process. It's a journey. It's non-linear. And so it's going to look circular for some people. It's hills and valleys for other people. But somebody who's been trained to use their lived experience, they still have that same process that they navigate. Sometimes they stumble. Sometimes they fall. Sometimes they have to get back up. That process looks very, very different, right? And so a person who uses their lived experience of recovery for mental illness or addiction and their skills that they've learned in formal training deliver services in the behavioral health setting to promote mind, body, recovery, and resiliency. What I love about resiliency, how many of us know we all need some strength to bounce back? We all do. And we've all had something in our lives where we've had to bounce back from, whether that was a financial challenge, whether that was, in my household, we have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old running around. So every day is a bounce back, okay? So, but all of that being said, resiliency is a beautiful character trait that I believe embodies and encompasses the essence of recovery. This does not mean that people are free from all symptoms or problems. I have been in recovery for now almost 14 years, and I still face life on life's terms, right? When that bank account hits zero, right, there's still a little tendency in me to go into crisis mode. When them bills deplete, and I'm like, honey, I'm hungry for some Chipotle, but we can't go to Chipotle, right? But there's other life issues. Sometimes I still face collateral consequences because of my criminal history. Sometimes I apply for jobs, numerous jobs, hundreds of numerous jobs, and they still tell me no, even though I literally have the ability and privilege to go into the White House and have conversations about reentry and recovery peer support and all of those things. So sometimes, although I have been in this journey for a long time, I am not free from all of the symptoms and problems that my life experience has brought my way. Rather, the idea of resiliency is that the symptoms do not significantly impact daily functioning. This, for you as clinicians, those who are clinicians in the room, this is the experience that you are looking for, right? When you're talking about how do we identify people with lived experience that will be good in our practice, good in our organization, good for the field of recovery, it's somebody whose problems or symptoms do not impact their daily functioning. That can look very broad. Y'all looking at me like, how do we know? Well, if you see that person up, moving in their right mind, showing up to the facilities that you work at, guess what? That person's a credible individual who has lived experience that can be utilized at your organization. The markers of recovery that suggest an individual is appropriate for peer support positions. So this is for you people who are trying to figure out, what does peer support look like in my organization, right? They're independent living. They're engaged in meaningful relationships. They have effective management of health and mental health conditions. They have maintenance of sobriety. Maintenance. That doesn't mean abstinence. Very clear. We all believe in multiple pathways. So guess what? Medically assisted treatment is a form of sobriety. Okay? Y'all looking at me like I'm talking Chinese right now. All right, you good with that? All right. Do we all adopt medically assisted treatment as a form of recovery? Okay, all right. Participation in practices that support self-care, health, and overall well-being. If a person has these points amongst others, they are a prime candidate for a peer recovery support position. Okay? Peer support as a profession. I do want to talk and specify about what it looks like specifically in Ohio, because we happen to be geographically situated here in Ohio. Ohio does require that peer supporters engage in ongoing training or education, known as continuing education units, to maintain their certification. They have to do that 30 hours over the course of 2 years. Every peer recovery supporter who is certified in the state of Ohio has to uphold this. Peer supporters are also required to abide by ethics and core values known as codes of conduct. So I really want you to understand that this is a profession. This is not just people with lived experience showing up saying, hey, I got lived experience, can you hire me? No, these are trained individuals who have a code of conduct, who have a code of ethics that they must adhere to by the state of Ohio. All right? I want to talk a little bit about the faces of peer support and how it kind of works, right? Because we all want to know, what is the magic about lived experience, right? Well, I'm going to give you a little inside peek on how it looks. Peer recovery supporters provide support and advocacy You all have heard phenomenal conversations, phenomenal tips to the trade from advocates across the country doing phenomenal work. You have some of the GOATs, greatest of all times, in your presence who do great advocacy work both locally and nationally, some even worldwide. But they work with peers to connect them to the resources in the community. This is at the core what advocacy is about. Making sure that people have accessibility to the resources that will aid them in their recovery. A peer recovery supporter gets to role model recovery. How many of us remember our childhood role models? We all have some that we look up to even today, whether we're 22 or pushing 82. We all have role models. And peer recovery supporters have a wealth of experience that navigating their own journey can help role model for other people who are navigating the same journey. What I love about this is that peer recovery support does bring a sense of diversity. And what do I mean by diversity? We do have to specify, due to current executive orders, diversity means that we are talking about differences of backgrounds, okay? I do want to make sure that we understand when we're talking about this type of terminology, we're talking about different backgrounds. I'm not talking about anything that is not supposed to be talked about in the current executive orders, okay? So for our people on Zoom, please do not turn me in. This is just simply talking about people with different backgrounds. Peer supporters can work in many settings. This is another expression of what we mean by diversity. They can work in a various array of settings. I myself work in justice-involved settings. So that means in courtrooms, in prisons, in jails, in halfway houses. That's the privilege of where I get to serve. But there's other places like hospitals, sober living units, recovery houses, community-based peer support. There are so many diverse expressions of peer recovery support that literally we can meet people exactly where they are, wherever they may be. Also, peer recovery support is about facilitating positive change. The spirit of recovery and resilience is grounded in hope and optimism. I see some folks who have partaken in my 40-hour peer support training in here. And everybody who has been a part of any training that I've done, two things that I harp on. Peer recovery support is about one thing. It's about hope. And who is it all about? It's about your peer. This is the two main impetuses of peer recovery support. So, when we're talking about providing support and advocacy, what in the world does that mean? Right? Well, the idea is that peer recovery supporters coach their peers to be independent. Independent. How many of us know independency is a critical part of the journey of recovery? We all want independency. I was enjoying the dialogue between Brooke and Dee about Brooke wanting to fight for a sense of independency. That's really what was taking place. And being able to attain that and find that gave her a sense of power, gave her a sense of resiliency, and allowed her to overcome and now be able to carve out her path forward in her journey. This is the story of recovery, y'all. This is what makes it so beautiful. But in addition to that, peer specialists advocate for their peers in treatment settings and within the community. And this is what Dee was doing as a mother, was advocating, was helping to fight for the highest good of her daughter. And that's what we as peer advocates can do alongside of our peers. Role modeling recovery by sharing our stories. How many of us know shared experiences is a beautiful thing? When we find somebody who can relate to what we've been through, it's a game changer. And that's what we as peer specialists or peer recovery supporters can do. We get to share a similar experience and model healthy, effective decision-making for our peers in a non-hierarchical relationship. See, we level the playing field. There's no big I's and little U's in peer recovery support. We're all together fighting towards the same goal. And what's that goal, y'all? What's it? Hope. Somebody said it. Say it like you mean it. All right. Yeah, it's all about hope. And we can inspire others to do the same. Peer support brings diversity. And so I make sure that I had to specify, but I even broke it down even more plain. So if you're taking screenshots on Zoom, this is a one that you would want to screenshot. Significant interpersonal relationships and a shared sense of community lay the foundation for the process of healing. Being from a spiritual background and finding my recovery in a spiritual pathway, one of the core essences of what I believe about healing is that it happens in community. There's a scripture that I quote often, and it says, you know, if you have some challenge or some type of baggage or some type of weight or a sin, as the Bible says it is, you bring it before the elders, allow them to lay hands on you, and the Bible says that you will be healed. And so there's a communal element to the healing process that peer recovery support adds to whatever type of work your agency or organization is doing. Peers come from all backgrounds and can represent unique parts of our community. And so this DEI statement right here is all about just bringing people to the table and allowing them the ability to have access to the supports and resources for them to recover well. Okay? Peer recovery support specialists work to motivate. This is where we get the term motivational interviewing from, which is also, by the way, an evidence-based practice, okay? But the goal is to motivate our peers through positive means by highlighting strengths and resources. This is also known as a person-centered approach, okay? We're talking about a strengths-based approach and person-centered approach. And the goal is to facilitate change through goal setting, education, and skills building. So how does peer support benefit anyone? I'm sure you're probably thinking, what is the benefit of all this? If I bring this to my organization or we bring this full scale to the community, what's the benefit? Well, it does help to facilitate and enhance a person's own recovery, right? How many of us know choice is important in the recovery process? When we go to the grocery store, we like to have choices on what food we eat, right? When we go to the car lot, we want to have options, right? When we're purchasing a home, we like to make sure we have options. When we put on clothes, we have a closet full of clothes because we like options. The same is important for a person who is navigating the recovery experience. Options open up pathways. Pathways lead to successful outcomes. Amen? All right. Step number 2, it also provides increased meaning and purpose in the life of a peer specialist. This right here was one of the creme de la cremes, if you will, of why peer recovery support was critical in my life. It gave me a sense of purpose. It gave me a sense of meaning. And guess what? The credential to get me in the door was the very thing that had kept me out for years, my lived experience. And so I applied, no exaggeration, I've applied for over 700 jobs since I've been home. And peer recovery support was the only option that gave me an opportunity. And so because of that, this literally has been a lifeline to sustain my wife, my children, and my own personal recovery since I've come home in 2017. Step 3, peer support does benefit because it actively works to reduce the stigma and inspire others in their process of recovery. So these are the things that help reduce the stigma associated with mental health challenges and substance use disorder, but it also gives you the fuel to inspire people that hope and change are possible. We wake up in the morning because we need hope, right? And when we wake up in the morning and we have hope, it gives us the ability to go out and take whatever challenges we face in the world. All of us in this room, because of the work that we do, how many of us got challenges? All right. I'm making sure I'm in a room with people who understand. But what gives you the fuel to continue to fight the good fight? Jesus, I love that answer. That's always going to be a right answer if I'm up here. Amen. But the hope that somebody will catch the vision, the hope that somebody will come out better than they came in, the hope that somebody will recover. And peer recovery supporters add value the same way. So we talked about stigma. How many of us know what stigma is? How many, who wants to share? Share with me what stigma is. Just, you can shout it out. No right or wrong answers. Person-centered approach.
Chuck and what one believes one is due to their history or past or position.
I love it. Well, what somebody believes they are because of their past position. Anybody else? Barriers. I love it. It's good. Absolutely. All of those are right answers. Stigma involves these implicit and explicit stereotypes that people hold towards individuals or sometimes themselves. These stereotypes lead to prejudice and ultimately discrimination. There are two types of stigma for people in recovery. There's the public stigma and the self-stigma, right? The public stigma is the barriers. The self-stigma is our identity being shaped by the things that people tell us we are or that we've come from. I just defined all of that. We ain't going to go through all of that. But how do we reduce stigma, right? We reduce stigma in an effective way by having direct personal contact with the stigmatized group. What better way to overcome than to have contact with people that, hey, you know what? I got some bias against you. It changes your perspective. Peer recovery supporters can effectively reduce self-stigma through the peer support role. And at the same time, they can reduce public stigma through advocacy and outreach efforts. This is how peer recovery supporters can partner as a paraprofessional in the continuum of care to reduce stigma. We're talking about what is the benefit of peer recovery support. So how does it all work, right? We all want to know what's the trick to the trade? What's the secret magic? What's the secret sauce? I tell people the secret sauce is my lived experience, by the way. But when I go to Wendy's, this is a side note. I go to Wendy's down in, does anybody know where Newark, Ohio is? Absolutely. So I work at the Licking County Coalition for Housing. And I help people who are overcoming justice involvement find housing solutions. But I go to the Wendy's down there on the square right across the street from the courthouse, and I go in there and I always get one of them biggie bags that comes with like the burger and the fries and the nuggets. And they always ask you one question about what's the sauce? And they always, when they know it's me, they see me and they hear me on the microphone because I go there every day. Forgive me, it's not a healthy option. But I go there every day and they always say, oh, never mind, you are the sauce. And so, and it's funny because that's literally what I tell them. I don't need no sauce, I am the sauce. And so now they got it ingrained in their head. But peer support works because it's a unique relationship that's considered as a system of receiving and giving. Again, it's called the law of reciprocity, right? Peer support is reciprocal. These are shared values of peer recovery support, and it's founded on key principles: respect, shared responsibility, and mutual agreement. How many of us know those things are critical in relationships? Absolutely. And I think some of the challenges that we've heard expressed is that these things didn't exist in some of those relationships that people found themselves in, right? There wasn't a sense of respect. There wasn't a sense of shared responsibility, and there wasn't a mutual agreement. Sometimes it was prescribed, sometimes it was involuntary, whatever the case may have been, right? There wasn't a mutual agreement. Peer supporters focus heavily on the identification of strengths, skill building, effective symptom management, goal setting among those with whom they work. So, how many of us know, no matter who you are, you have strengths? I come from the impetus or the framework of mind that the gifts of God are irrevocable and without repentance. So no matter what life experience you may have, you have a gift. You have a gift. Now, as peer recovery supporters, it's our goal to collaborate with our peers to understand and identify how can we use those gifts to facilitate positive change in the lives of those navigating recovery. That's what we mean by the identification of strengths, right? Somebody who is navigating overcoming a substance use disorder, they have the strength of resourcefulness. They know how to get resources. They've managed for years an active addiction, right? So they figured it out. So somebody who's overcoming a mental health challenge, they have the gift of resiliency. Do you know what it takes for somebody who has a mental health challenge to just get up out of bed in the morning? That's a gift. That's a strength. That's resiliency. And we identify that as peer recovery supporters. Guess why? Because we've been there too. We skill build, right? We want to build the skills. So that means being able to identify what gaps in skills people may have, right? In addition, peer recovery supporters are trained to provide outreach. They're trained to provide advocacy. They're trained to provide social and logistical support. We talked about the logistical components of recovery, but also education. Who better to teach about something than somebody who's went through it themselves? Right? That's why we hire people in Ashland University who have degrees in the field that they're teaching in, right? Because they have experience in that field. So here's some national guidelines for peer supporters. I always share the national guidelines. Again, I think of peer support on a global level personally, and I do believe it adds value across the world. But I just want to give you a high-level overview because it's so important that wherever you may go, you see the value and importance of peer recovery support. So national guidelines for peer supporters. Number one, it's voluntary. You cannot force and mandate people to be in peer recovery support. People do it. The courts do it. I have been a part of that process where the courts have mandated somebody come and see Stan Frankart, the peer recovery supporter, and we make it work. But that's not ethically how it's supposed to be. It should be a willing decision. And it's very easy to make that happen. It's very easy to say, hey, KK, you know what? I know Stan, who's a guy who's been in long-term recovery, and I think it would be awesome for you to connect with him. What do you think about just setting up a time to have a conversation? Would that be something you'd be down to do? See how easy that was? I didn't force nothing on her. I just made a simple suggestion. So that's how we can do it voluntarily. It's authentic, being open-minded, empathetic, respectful, honest, and direct. How many of us know authenticity is something that's critical in people? We all love an authentic person, right? We don't want nobody coming in, putting on the mask and doing all the tricks and jumping through the hoop. We want somebody who's genuinely who they are, whether they're up here or they're down there, right? National guideline is that peer recovery supporters are called to be change agents. And I love this because we are ethically bound to keep recovery first, all designed to facilitate change. We're ethically bound as peer recovery supporters to do that, nationally and locally. I don't know about y'all, but this stuff gets me excited. Guiding principles of peer support. Confidentiality. I'm not going to read all of the lengthy print there. You'll get this PowerPoint. You can feel free to review back on it. But confidentiality is a guiding principle. What's said here stays here. We always say here in rooms that we've been in. But the reality of it is confidentiality is a critical piece of peer recovery support. Recovery, right? It is important that the conversations, the lived experience, the dialogue that takes place, the relationships that develop, it's all geared towards facilitating recovery. Be very clear. All of that is designed intentionally for recovery. Social connection. How many of us know what the 4 main parts of recovery are? Can you tell me what they are? 4 main components of what recovery is. I like it. It's good. I'll give you a hint. I'll give you the first letters of each word. Is that fair? All right. H. Oh, I love it. That's always going to be a good answer with Stan. That's always going to be a good answer. That's not it, though. H. Nope. Home, health, purpose, community. These are the 4 main components that facilitate recovery according to Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. 4 main components: health, home, purpose, community. You can look it up on OMAS's website. Social connection is part of that community. How many of us know people don't recover by themselves? We need a community. We need support. We need people around us. Resilience and self-management, right? Self-efficacy is one of the most critical pieces of the recovery process. And peer recovery support is designed to empower people to become self-sustaining. What is recovery? Well, in order for us to understand the value of peer supporters, we have to understand the importance of recovery, right? Recovery is the unique and personal process of reestablishing and or developing new meaning and purpose in one's life after a period of illness or decompensation. It involves a process of change. This is the normal SAMHSA definition right here. It involves a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. Okay? So in order for us to understand the value of peer support, guess what? We need to understand that definition. So if I was somebody who was taking notes or pictures, this would be something I'd be picturing, noting, doing something with, because this is a very critical piece if you're going to have any sense of why peer recovery support is valuable. Okay? For recovery to be fully realized, we must be considerate of the social context and cultural systems of value and meaning. How many of us know that value and meaning changes from person to person? What's valuable to Stan may not be valuable for Susie. What's valuable to Susie may not be valuable to Tim. But it's important that we pay close attention to the local context and values that define healthy and fulfilling life goals, roles, and trajectories. Guess who's able to do this? Your people with lived experience, peer recovery supporters, because they are the people who are living in that context. Clinical, essentially the goal of clinical approaches is to reduce and or control symptoms. That's the goal of clinical approaches, right? To control or reduce symptoms. Existential. It's the hope, responsibility, self-direction, empowerment, and spirituality of an individual. We have to have these things in order for people to find out that recovery is possible. They have to have their own sense of responsibility in it. They have to have their own self-direction. They have to have the hope that it's possible. Why would I do something that I don't even think is possible? Right? Empowerment, being able to do it. And then spirituality. I do think this is a core component, and I'm not talking about Jesus Christ. I'm saying spirituality in the larger term. For me, it was Jesus, right? But for other people, it may be nature. For other people, it may be universalism. For other people, it may be meditation. But they have to have some form of a bigger purpose and meaning in life than themselves. That's what I mean by spirituality. Functional. It has to be functional. There has to be an effective participation in daily life, such as housing, employment, and education. That's what peer recovery supporters do. They provide the functional components that help sustain and aid people in the recovery process. How many of us have had the experience of going to a landlord and being denied because of our criminal history? Oh, so you wouldn't be able to tell me where I can go to get housing, right? This is why peer recovery support is so critical, Because guess what? I done navigated and I done vetted the resources that are going to tell you no. So guess what? I get to maximize your hope rather than diminish your hope. Because I'm going to send you the resources from my own lived experience that have aided me in my recovery. Same with employment, same with education, right? This is why peer recovery support is functional. It's physical because guess what? We promote physical health and well-being. So guess what? Stan might only be able to do 1 or 2 push-ups. Am I going to tell Stan, hey, you know what? You need to just add, going to the gym to your recovery plan? No, I'm not going to tell Stan that. Because Stan can't do but 1 or 2 push-ups. I'm going to tell Stan, hey, Stan, what do you think would help you actualize and realize recovery? You know what? I like going outside. Yeah. Nature walks sound amazing. Would that be something you'd be willing to try? You know what? I already kind of walk around my community. I could go to Hawken Hills and walk around on the trails there in Hawken Hills. Matter of fact, I'm just looking for somebody to do that with. Glad you said that, Stan. I'd love to take a walk with you through the hills of Hawken Hills, right? This is why peer recovery support adds value. This is why it's beneficial. It's social, establishing and maintaining those healthy relationships and family, right? We are going to say, hey, family is however you define it. Stan has family all over. I got family in the room right now. You didn't even know it. And it's family by choice. They chose me, and so I chose them, right? Absolutely. And that's the beauty of peer recovery support. So why should we hire peer recovery supporters? And I'll leave y'all alone after this because I want to make sure I make room for questions. But why should we hire peer recovery supporters? Peer supporters are, a program that's effective. Research, I'm all about research. How many of us like good research? We all like numbers, right? Research reveals that positive outtakes of these programs for the participants and the providers are possible because of the effectiveness of peer recovery support. Furthermore, peer recovery supporters are equally as effective as other healthcare providers to stabilize clients, and perhaps more effective at quickly engaging clients who are resistant or alienated from the healthcare system. So if you're wondering, should we add this to our organization, to our business, to our practice, I would say the answer is absolutely yes. You'll learn a lot more about it. I got plenty of more slides, but I'm not going to belabor you with all of that. Other than that, if you have questions, any questions? Yes, I see a hand up over there. All right, there you go.
Where is that hand? Oh. That's okay. We got people listening online.
I was just wondering, at what point in sobriety do you recommend for a person to apply to be a peer supporter? Like after 1 year, after 2 years, 5 years?
Yeah, national standard is actually 12 months. Is it 2 years? Okay. Well, I have been told that it was 12 months. So national standard, according to KK, she's probably way more knowledgeable in this area than I am, is 2 years. Here in the state of Ohio, I do know that they ask for at least 6 months. No, they don't? Okay. What do they ask for? Huh? We've had them in the class, but I think that they put on OMAS's website a particular number. And I think that number is 6 months. We don't ask. OMAS owns all of that. But I do know if national standard is 2 years, I would say I'm a very person-centered individual. So I would say, this is where them bullet points come into play. Is that person attaining those things? Have they maintained a form of sobriety, whatever that may look like for that individual? Because it may not look like total abstinence. And I think we have to be open to the reality that sobriety doesn't necessarily mean total abstinence. But, you know, I think as long as we understand that they're maintaining their own lives, they're having a self-directed form of recovery, they're invested in the recovery process, and they've been maintaining whatever form of sobriety looks like for them, I would say, you know, I give them 6 months to a year, and then, hey, you never know. 2 years is the national standard, so I would say give them 2 years, just because ethically I'm bound to tell you what the national standard is, but I'm a person-centered individual. So I trust that, like, as long as that person's been navigating that process and has the proper supports, I think they would be at least a candidate to experiment. Absolutely. Absolutely. Another question.
Hi, I have the family peer support certification through Mental Health and Addiction Services. And I know through that training, there was a prescribed amount of time they hoped us to work with a family. Is it the same thing true with this peer support?
No, so it's actually not time limited with peer recovery support. And the reason why it's not is because the recovery process is non-linear and it's very different depending on who's the person, right? So we don't have a prescription of time available. I would say if you're talking about billable services, then you can work with a peer for 4 hours in 1 day, but you can do that 7 days a week. So just a little caveat there, but not time sensitive. Good questions. I appreciate those. Anybody else?
Additional questions?
Question, comment? Everybody like, I'm ready to get up out of here. I don't blame. Oh,
We got one more before we go.
oh, hold on 1 second. I think that lady there is yep, perfect.
I was just wondering, how would people who are not in our business, how would they find peer support groups or anything like that?
Yeah, great question. So I'm always going to recommend Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. There are local agencies that I think have peer recovery support groups, like Catholic Charities. I think Pathways has peer recovery support groups. You can go on NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. You can go on SAMHSA and find a producing document of various things. At least I found them there. And then you can also always, I would say, reach out in your local community to a peer that you may know and ask them, hey, what's available? Because usually they're in the know-how. Street cards are another way. I always talk about street cards. I'm an advocate for street cards because sometimes folks just don't have access to technology and stuff. So street cards is another way. And then, you know, your local providers also have some information on that as well.
Yep. Your local friendly mental health and recovery board.
Yes.
Always has great information.
Yes.
Yep.
Are you like independent? Do you have your own number for the state of Ohio or wherever you work out of?
I do have my own Medicaid billing number, MPI number. I have my own nonprofit tax exempt number. But as far as like being a peer recovery supporter, you get a certification, and then that has also a certification number on it as well.
Right.
Good question.
Anything else? Well, can we thank Stanley? Well, thank you all for hanging in there with us. I'm sorry about the little technical thing with Mr. Bassman, but I'm glad we got him back. In your packet, if you haven't done it already, there was that evaluation. If you could take just a second to complete that. Sandy's in the back there. She looks really friendly. She's waving at you. There she is. If you want to drop off your evaluation there, she also has a certificate suitable for framing if you want to pick that up as well. And on behalf of the board and the planning committee, thank you for coming out to this year's 16th annual RSVP conference. Thank you, everybody.
For sure.